So, hello, my dear friends and my teacher. Today, I'm going to be talking to you all about the theme of death in I Couldn't Stop for Death by Emily Dickinson. But right before I start my presentation, I want to talk about the things that I'm going to cover in this presentation. Firstly, I'm going to give some brief background information about the poem and the author. Then, I'm going to analyze the theme of death in three main aspects, three main different perspectives, and then I'm going to do a quick wrap up and summarize the whole thing that I actually talked about throughout the presentation. I'm going to summarize it. So, Emily Dickinson, who was born in 1830, is one of the most prominent figures of poetry in the world of literature, and she still is appreciated by many people across the world, and her works are still widely read and studied. And like many other poets, she wasn't appreciated real much while she was alive. Actually, 4 years after her death, some of her friends discovered some of her poems, and they decided to publish them. And after that, she started to gain recognition. People began to appreciate her and her works even more. And most of her works mainly deal with death, sickness, and nature, these kind of themes. When it comes to the poem, Because I Couldn't Stop for Death, it is one of the most popular lyrical poems written by Emily Dickinson. As I stated before, it was published by some of friends of Emily Dickinson 4 years after her death in a series titled as The Chariot. It mainly focuses on the theme of death and its connection with mortality, death, afterlife, and its inevitability. Also, death is personified to convey the meaning. So Emily Dickinson used personification to make the concept death look like a life to convey the meaning. So I'm going to focus on the theme of death right now. Before I start to analyze the theme of death, I put the poem in here so that we can look at it, go back and forth, and check and analyze it better. So the first concept is death and its inevitability. So to be able to understand and analyze it better, we should analyze the possible meanings of the phrase "I couldn't stop for death." So what does this mean? There are some possible meanings. The first one is in the first stanza. In the first stanza, the word "stop" is used in the meaning of picking up. So therefore, death makes a stop to pick the speaker of the poem, like a taxi, like a bus. The death makes a stop and picks her up and goes on the journey. Even though she doesn't want to die, which means that death is inevitable and there's nothing to do about it. Even though she may not want to go, death came for her anyway and took her. So this implies that death is inevitable. The second meaning in the first line, because I couldn't stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. So we could say that the speaker might be so busy and occupied with the flow of life that she didn't realize the approach of death, and instead death came for her. So she was so busy, she was so occupied with her life and everything going on that she didn't even realize the approach of death. But death came for her anyway, even though she didn't realize it. So it also shows the inevitability of death. And the third meaning in the first two lines, as I suggested before, it may also mean that the speaker is too afraid to accept the fact that she is going to die, and that is why she couldn't stop for death, but death came for her. The reason why she couldn't stop for death might be because she was too afraid to face it, too afraid to accept it. This is another possible meanings, but whatever the correct meaning is, out of all these three meanings, all of them points to the inevitability of death and that all human beings are going to die when the time comes. So whatever the meaning might be, all of them suggest that the death is inevitable and it's going to come for all of us, for all human beings. My opinion, I think, apart from this meaning, I think that the speaker is aware of death's inevitability, and she accepts it pleasantly instead of being afraid and run away from it. Because in the line, he kindly stopped for me, it suggests that this word, it suggests that she actually um, met the death in better circumstances, in good circumstances, and she was actually pleasant with it. So instead of being afraid of it and running away from it, she accepted it and decided to go along with it. Yeah, in my opinion, of course. So the second concept is death and its connection with life. When death comes to pick the speaker up for his mortality journey, it shows the speaker certain phases of life before arriving at the destination of death. That is to say, death gives the speaker a chance to experience and live through the joyful and happy moments for the last time. Therefore, journey to death becomes a happy and joyful experience rather than a torturous one. It's like in real life when some people experience near death experiences. They say that my life flashed before my eyes. It is like this. Yeah, it's exactly like this. So when we look at the, I'm going to analyze it right now. When we look at the third and fourth stanzas, we pass the schools where children stroll at recess in the ring. We pass the fields of gazing grain. We pass the setting sun. So from these lines, we can conclude that the speaker witnesses certain periods and phases of life, such as a setting sun, children playing, and wandering around the gazing grain fields right before death. So all these moments flash before the speaker's eyes, right before she was going to die. And so I'm going to explain what all of this stands for. I'm going to explain the things that they represent. So children playing represents the joys and happy moments of the childhood of the speaker. Fields of gazing grain represents the speaker's growth and ripening from childhood to adulthood. So the growing up period between these two times. And witnessing the sunset represents the final moments of the speaker before death. So as the sun sets, so the speaker also dies. Yeah, it represents it. All in all, I think that, in my opinion, the carriage ride turns into a last beautiful memory of the phase of life before the speaker passes away, because it shows the fragments of beautiful moments of the speaker. So it makes the experience of death a pleasant one, in my opinion. So the last concept, the doubts about the existence of afterlife. Judging from the last two lines of the first stanza, the carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. We could say that death also picks immortality up along the way in Journey to Death, which might mean that there's an afterlife in which the speaker will live forever. So if death made a stop for the speaker and then also took the immortality along the way, it might mean that there's actually an eternal life at the end of the road. So yeah, it suggests an afterlife, existence of an afterlife. However, this is important. Emily Dickinson doesn't mention about immortality or afterlife after the first stanza ever again. So the only time that she mentions about it is in the first stanza. So this might mean that she might be unsure about if there's an afterlife. So the final concept. So it is unknown whether immortality will leave the speaker. So So it is unknown whether immortality will leave the speaker in a part of the journey so that the speaker can rest in peace, or it will stay with the speaker along the journey for an afterlife. So we don't know whether the immortality left the speaker in the middle of the way and let her die in peace, or whether the immortality and speaker uh, kept going on the journey together, and the speaker might enter into an afterlife. This might mean that. So, therefore, neither the speaker nor the readers are sure about whether there's an afterlife or not. So, it is open to absolute debate. So, my take, in my opinion, I think that the poem leaves it up to us to decide whether there is an afterlife or not, which exists, in my opinion. Of course, I base my opinions on the poet. So, if there's not an afterlife, why would death take the immortality along the way? So, yeah, I think that if the death made a stop and took the immortality along the way, there's actually an afterlife at the end of the road. So why else would it take it for? And why else the death would take the immortality? Yeah, I think it suggests that there is an eternal life and afterlife. So to conclude and wrap it up what I have said, Because We Couldn't Stop for Death by Emily Dickinson is mainly centered around the theme of death and its connection with inevitability, life, and immortality. So these three basic concepts are related to the theme of death, according to the poem. So on the whole, I think that the poem puts forward that death is inevitable for all human beings. death is strongly connected to life, witnessing phases of life before death, and this was the thing that actually connected life to death. And there might be an afterlife depending on the perspective of the readers. So if I was in a classroom right now, I would ask my friends, what do you think about it? There's an afterlife or not according to this poem? So since I'm not in a classroom, I cannot ask it. So let's skip it. So thank you for listening to me on the whole. By the way, I put down the link of a video which is an animated version of the poem for you to understand the poem better. So it will help you understand and analyze it better. It will be better if you check it out. So thank you so much for listening to me.